everybody. This is Keri Wilmot. I am a pediatric occupational therapist here with the Understood team. And we have a special guest with us today, Kate Tan. And Kate and I are going to be talking to you about ADHD and emotions and all the things that as parents you're going to want to know about as your kids get older and graduate from high school and college. And so Kate is going to share with us. She is a UCLA graduate and works as a marketing specialist. So Kate, do you want to share with us a little bit about your journey with ADHD?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Kate. I'm happy to be here with you, Keri. For me, I am 22 years old, and I did not get diagnosed until I was about 21. It was like 2-ish years ago now. So I have gotten kind of in the groove of having it. And the thing is, it's knowing I've had it like as a formal diagnosis, because it's the lifelong condition. I've had it since forever, but it's more of now I finally have access to the resources and support because I have this name, this label for it. And it's been very, very helpful. It's definitely been something that has been present throughout my life. But it wasn't really until college where I realized that I needed extra help for it. And it's especially something that I've realized that impacts my life, especially after graduating from college and joining the workforce, just because, ADHD affects executive functioning and kind of creating your own schedule for yourself, things like that. And that's a big part of what adulthood is. So getting adjusted to that has been a big part of this post-grad life transition, right, but making through it.
So I've been a pediatric occupational therapist for 24 years, and I've, mainly worked a lot with kids sort of when they're in the beginning phases, right? And they maybe have not received a diagnosis yet. Parents are concerned because they're having trouble focusing. Maybe they're having trouble sitting still, and it's been different. I've seen a lot of changes over the last 24 years. I wrote a book for teachers to help them understand what sensory processing is like in the classroom setting. It's called Wired Differently, a teacher's guide to understanding sensory processing challenges. And a lot of that also from my professional life, what came into play when I became a mom. And I also am the parent of a son who is 13 years old and has ADHD. And so, I've really enjoyed my time with Understood because it's allowed me to connect with people like you and parents. Also we have, the Wonder app that's part of Understood, where I am a group host. This particular group that I'm a part of is Ask an Expert, Movement and Sensory Challenges. So, we have a lot of great places for parents to, be able to ask questions and connect with people like us so that we can, help their kids move forward. And, I think one of the things that I know that I'm really curious to ask you about as a parent is that, when your child is first diagnosed, or I've, worked a lot with kids with learning and thinking differences, and I've talked to a lot of parents in the process, and there's a little bit of fear there, the fear of, what is going to happen to my child in the future? They're young now, we're having meltdowns, the routines are really challenging and things are difficult, but what is their life going to be like in 10 years when they're in high school and transitioning, into college eventually? And what's the workforce going to be like for them? So, from your perspective, looking back, if you, maybe talking a little bit about some of the symptoms that you recognized in high school, or if you could offer any advice to parents about, what it was in high school that really helped you, I think that would be, help alleviate some of the fear that we have as parents.
For sure. It's definitely very understandable. There still is this sort of stigma against ADHD because you hear the word disorder and all of a sudden you're feeling worried, how can I help my child best? And I would say that, because I know for sure that's something my parents felt when I told them about my diagnosis, but something that I would say helped that I didn't know was helping me at the time, but it isn't until I kind of looked back. It's that doing a sport and just really staying active throughout high school is something that was really, really helpful for me because it kind of allowed me to take that internal restlessness or that hyperactivity that comes with ADHD and kind of channel it into something else, and channel it into something more productive because it's good for my body and it's also good for my brain, which not something it's which I am not as much of a fan of, because it's like, dang, the things that they tell you work best are the things that actually work for you. And I think that was helpful because it helped me not only create that physical activity, to kind of channel that elsewhere, but also kind of helping me with creating a structure. Because then after school, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I needed to make sure that all my work was done so that I could be going to class, be going to my sport. Because if I didn't finish my work, it's either academics or the sports or the friends, and I was not wanting to give up the academics or the friends. So nor the sport, but that was the thing that I was like trying to do the most, so that I could kind of incentivize myself as well and keep myself motivated, but having that structure, because without it, when I would be off season, I would just be taking a nap. And so that's the same thing. So it's more of a being able to do something else with it and still having fun, because that's also the most important part. A lot of the times we want to be making sure that we're motivated by things that we enjoy, and doing things because you like them too.
Right. Yeah. That was, I think, one piece that I really liked hearing you say that, is that as an occupational therapist, we talk about self-regulation, right? Part of it, having a sensory diet for kids to pay attention and focus, is these short bursts of physical activity throughout the course of their day. And so I really love just kind of hearing you nonchalantly say, like, playing a sport really helped me, because I think, that's kind of, as occupational therapists, what we're often, doesn't have to necessarily be an organized sport, right? I mean, you did great in an organized sport. Some kids with ADHD struggle with all the rules and the social aspects of it. I think the physical activity, whether it's a sport or it could be martial arts, it could be riding a bicycle, walking the dog, swimming is another great activity to do, physical activity to do, that really helps with a lot of that self-regulation. So I loved hearing you say that physical activity helps you, because it does. And I think for kids, ingraining that as part of the routine when they're younger really sets the stage for later on, when they're able to understand the difference between how much better they're able to focus if they got up and went to the gym for an hour before they started their work routine or something like that. So, what about, as you, got into college, like, what was it? Because I know you said that you weren't diagnosed until you were in college. What were some of the symptoms that you were experiencing, or the things that you noticed that made you kind of wonder, like, oh, could this be ADHD?
Sure. I think that I probably was experiencing the symptoms when I was in high school, but they were more manageable because the workload in high school is very different from that compared to in college. So I remember in high school actually spending my entire weekends just making notes for one class, and I did not realize that that was not normal. Like, I would do that the whole time. But the thing is, that was manageable in high school because I only had one class that was like difficult in that level. However, in college, all of the classes were like that. So when I started going to college, and whenever I started struggling, one thing struggling with another, and I was on the quarter system, it was all very quick. So it's very easy to start falling behind. And those coping mechanisms that had worked for me before just were not working anymore. And I realized it's harder for me to absorb things. It's harder for me to it takes a longer time for me to absorb things. Or like, I remember when I would take tests, I would get so nervous that I'd blink. Like, I would be studying the whole night and I'd still end up blinking. And I think that those ended up being symptoms just because it was like that forgetfulness, or like that the test anxiety that comes with that. And also just when I would be writing papers, for example, papers were always so terrible for me. I got so nervous about them that I would probably need like a month in advance. And like, once I knew about paper, I would just be constantly thinking about it and like mentally preparing myself, because I would spend like 4 hours in the library and I'd only eke out like a paragraph. And it was very frustrating because I was like, how can some people just do it like overnight? And I couldn't. And it made papers really difficult, just very difficult overall. And it just felt like I I was working on hard mode when everybody else was not. And I think that those were some of the symptoms because, and I don't think I would have realized I had it unless I had like talked to people and they were like, wait, I don't have to do that. And I was like, what? So realizing what those symptoms are because you might be experiencing something and you just didn't know that there was a name for it. And then the power in the getting the diagnosis for it and putting a name to it is that once you know about it, then that's how you are able to see that there are direct resources and support for this that thing that I was dealing with. And luckily it was a very long process because I had suspected I had it probably 9-ish months before I even got diagnosed, but it was a very difficult process. But I know that differs from person to person when it comes to diagnoses.
So you would say the executive functioning part of your ADHD is what impact, like, did it give you some anxiety and some stress? And that was what was difficult for you to kind of manage?
Yeah, definitely the executive functioning. I don't know them at the top of my head anymore, but yeah, just little things like that. I would say the executive functioning, but that end up creating that bigger thing. I would be getting sleepy in lectures, even if I wanted to be paying attention. That made it difficult. But luckily, I mean, not so luckily, when we had the COVID hit, I was able to watch them back afterwards and like watch the lectures, and that was really helpful. So little things like that. But
I think that's kind of what was, so once you found out and you started finding about all these accommodations that could help you. So what were some of those accommodations in college that really have helped you into your current role in your job to be able to be successful?
Sure. And I think that these accommodations, well, I believe that accessibility, when it's a universal thing, it would help everybody because they're relatively simple. It's just about implementing them. And so, for example, in college, that meant sometimes like recording the lectures and including captions for things because I might be better at reading it and processing it rather than listening to it and processing it.
Right.
So I think that was really helpful. And that's something that the aspect of writing things and seeing it written is something that helps me still today in work. So when my boss tells me that, gives me some sort of project or an assignment, she'll usually tell it to me and also have it written, or I'll have it written down as she's speaking. And she knows that I'm not paying attention to her. I'm writing down what she's saying. And then after I write down what she has said, I will repeat it back to her to make sure that I understood everything correctly and I'm not missing any little thing. She also is aware, my boss is aware that I have ADHD, and I think that is up to the discretion of the person, if they want to share that or not. But for me, I am now very proud of my identity as someone who has ADHD, and I would not want to be in a workplace personally that doesn't value that, because I do think that there is value in the ways that the differences in the neurodiversity that we have. And so I let her know all the time and say, please, if there's something that I forget, if something slips through the cracks, like, because things do, like, feel free to follow up with me, check in on me, and make sure that I'm doing these things. And she has usually been pretty good about that. And she's aware that it is a result of my ADHD. I'm not just, I don't want to do this task. This is, it's just something that I have forgotten on all the list of other things. I also tend to work in short bursts of time, and they are fine with that because I'll do a bunch of work and then send it over. And just kind of listening to what your brain and your body needs, I think, is really important. And I think that this is also being able to have been working from home has been really helpful because it allows me to kind of do that and process that if I need to. But when I am in the office, I usually am walking around in between every task so that I'm kind of staying awake, staying alert, and channeling that, like we've said, like elsewhere. And then that's helped me because I can do this stuff quickly. And so there might be times where I'm not working, but I need that time to let my brain breathe, for lack of a better word, lack of a better phrasing, but because then that helps me maintain the speed where I've been doing in the past.
Right. And I think what's been really interesting for me to hear those accommodations that work for you is, on the younger age group, we're still making those same recommendations, right? We're allowing kids to have extra time. We're letting kids stand at their desks. We're letting them take breaks. We're letting them move around the room. We're asking them to repeat the instructions back. Like those are all very much so the same kinds of accommodations that we're giving kids younger that will transition with them into high school, college, and life, and I think, it's really important to not only understand that, but to teach kids at young ages, right? That those are the kinds of strategies that work for them, and to share that with those teachers or coaches or people who are around them so that they have the ability to, advocate for themselves. Because I think that's really the important piece here is that, what you need to learn might be a little bit different than somebody else, but we all have, different learning strengths. And so just advocating for what you need is, the important part, because that really makes a difference in your productivity. Right. And so I think we've had such an amazing chat. I love how we've talked about the self-regulation aspect, and that, physical activity really helps, kind of like reset the brain and focus and attend and really be ready for the kind of work that needs to be done. We've talked a lot about how ADHD impacts emotions and the executive functioning skills of being organized, and how that can sometimes lead to a little bit of anxiety. But I think over time, I think the big kind of important piece of this conversation is that accommodations really can help, right? And it's not, it's just simple things like knowing when to take a break, having an alternative like work setting where maybe you're working from home, or maybe you're getting up and moving, or you're working in those short bursts that you talked about. And so, I think it's really awesome to see how those kinds of accommodations can help, people really succeed in their daily lives moving forward. And so I want to thank everybody for joining us, and we've had an amazing chat. I hope that you also can join the Wonder app by Understood. There's lots of different community groups in there. I host the Ask an Expert Movement and Sensory Challenges group. There's other experts in there, and it's a really safe place for you to be able to go and ask questions about yourself if you have ADHD, about your child, to get more information about topics, to have credible resources. And we really hope that you can join us in the Wonder app. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day.